The Knicks defensive duo is returning. OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson took a major step during practice. This indicates that both players are extremely close to returning. But unfortunately, everything isn't perfect. New York just announced that Josh Hart is dealing with a very concerning knee injury. We're going to break down all of these latest reports today. But before we get started, guys, about 54% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed to the channel. We are on a mission to try to reach 50,000 subscribers, and we could really use your support. If you enjoy daily Knicks content like this, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button because it could really support all the great content that we're creating for you. And now, let's get started. The Knicks receive amazing news about OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson. This is the way you want to start things off after the All-Star break, with good news. For the entire season, the Knicks have been wondering what a fully healthy Knicks team would look like. Well, you don't have to wonder anymore. According to these latest reports, they indicate that the Knicks defensive duo in Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby will be returning to this Knicks team very soon. Let's break down these latest reports. Shout out to Pete Bott from the New York Post for giving us the following information. According to him, the Knicks had their entire roster fully participating in practice yesterday for the first time this season, as Mitchell Robinson moved ever closer to making his season debut after All-Star break. Robinson was cleared for and resumed 5-on-5 scrimmaging, with OG Anunoby also making it through the entire session. Although Tom Thibodeau declined to say whether either or both will suit up for tonight's game against the Chicago Bulls. But thankfully, we dug into this a little bit further, and thanks to the people at SNY, they give us the following updates about OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, and when they're going to be returning to the court for New York. According to SNY, with Anunoby returning to practice without restrictions, it's fair to assume that the 27-year-old will return to game action tonight against the Chicago Bulls. Anunoby has not played since suffering a mild foot sprain against the Lakers on February 1st. Meanwhile, with Mitchell Robinson, him being cleared for contact is a huge step forward for the big man, who has yet to play this season due to off-season foot surgery. It's unclear exactly when Robinson might be able to return to game action, but his season debut appears to be drawing closer and closer. The New York Post continues here by giving us the following information from head coach Tom Thibodeau. According to Thibs, Mitch was good, OG was good, so it was good to be back out there. They did everything. When the New York Post asked if Mitchell Robinson could play Thursday for the first time since undergoing ankle surgery in May, Tom Thibodeau added, "I haven't heard anything from medical yet, so we'll see. But he looks good. He's got to get his timing back. But overall, he moved pretty well, but it will take some time." OG Anunoby benefited from the week-long vacation after the two-way forward sat out the final 5 games before the break with a sprained right foot. But as we heard from SNY, it looks like he could return tonight against the Chicago Bulls. Amazing update. We rarely get good news about the Knicks and any of our injured players, but today we finally got some good news, especially for OG Anunoby. With OG, I always thought he was either going to return tonight against the Chicago Bulls or tomorrow against the Cleveland Cavaliers, because he was a game-time decision multiple times the final few games before we went on the All-Star break. That told me that Anunoby was very close to returning. So him being able to return tonight or tomorrow against the Cavs, it's not a surprise. It's music to my ears. I'm happy to hear it. And the Knicks are absolutely going to need OG Anunoby and his elite defense in order to take down the Chicago Bulls, but more importantly, to take down the best team in the NBA right now. the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're going to need to win that game and make a statement in the process. And the best way to do it is to be as healthy as possible. Having OG Anunoby back for these 2 games is going to be very important. What OG Anunoby brings to the floor, his defense, his two-way play, we just look like a different team out there when he's on the floor. Defensively, we need OG Anunoby. And speaking about defense, we also heard about Mitchell Robinson. I am so happy that Robinson participated and was a full participant with no restrictions, no limitations in practice, 5-on-5 practice. This is a huge update for Mitchell Robinson because this was the next step. Once he got here, the clock starts. Now it's only a matter of time before Mitchell Robinson makes his season debut for this Knicks team. That means we're going to see that defensive duo in OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson share the court together. Can you imagine what that looks like? Penetrators are going to have to deal with OG Anunoby. And if you get inside the paint, then you're going to have to deal with Mitchell Robinson. Not to mention, Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart will be at the wings guarding those players. And if those players get into the paint, they're not going to have to chase them. They can stay with their man on the perimeter, on the wing, because any players that get by them are going to have to deal with OG and Mitchell Robinson. That defensive duo is going to shut down games. That's how good they are. And even though Mitchell Robinson isn't as close to returning as OG, because he went through 5-on-5 scrimmaging yesterday, and it's likely he's going to continue to go through that each and every day during practice, it's only a matter of time before we see the blockness monster return to this team, give us that defense that we desperately need, and allow us to see that double big lineup. But with the good news comes a little bit of bad news. And this bad news is in the form of Josh Hart, because the Knicks just announced that Josh Hart is dealing with a very concerning knee injury. So much so that he is out for tonight's game against the Chicago Bulls. Let's take a look at these latest reports about Josh Hart and his knee injury. We have a lot of updates here about Josh Hart and the knee injury that he's dealing with right now. Shout out to New York basketball, Ian Bagley, Steph Bondy, and MD Brian Scudder for giving us all of these updates about Josh Hart and what he's going through with his knee injury. According to New York basketball, Josh Hart is out on Thursday versus the Bulls. The Knicks announced Josh Hart is dealing with a patellofemoral syndrome in his right knee. OG Anunoby is questionable, and he likely will play tonight against the Bulls. Mitchell Robinson remains out, even though he practiced in full yesterday for the first time this season. But going back to Josh Hart, both NBA insiders Ian Bagley and Steph Bondy both confirmed what the injury report is stating about Josh Hart. According to Bagley, Josh Hart's injury is a patellofemoral syndrome in his right knee. Bondy confirmed the exact same thing. And according to Brian Scudder, who is an MD, he stated the following about that injury that Josh Hart is suffering from. It is not a concern at all. Should be fairly easy to load manage through the rest of the season. Essentially, it's pain that arises from poor load balance, too much or too little in the knee joint behind the kneecap. Very common, treated with PT and sometimes taping and bracing. This is horrible. Literally, Josh Hart is the heart and soul of this team. Now he's gone. He is out for tonight's game against the Bulls. I am hoping the Knicks are just doing this so he can be fully healthy or as healthy as possible for tomorrow's game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. In my opinion, the Knicks don't need to be 100% to beat this Bulls team tonight, but they're going to need to have all hands on deck to be able to take down the Cleveland Cavaliers, the best team in the NBA right now. According to these latest reports, though, even though Josh Hart is dealing with this syndrome in his right knee, the doctor did indicate that it does not seem serious. It is not concerning. It does sound like he can load manage this for this entire season. The problem is, you heard the word load manage. Will Tom Thibodeau load manage Josh Hart once he's active and available? I don't think so. And if you listen to the nature of this injury, it sounds like the reason he's even dealing with this type of injury is because he's playing significant minutes each and every single night. And moving forward, it doesn't sound like that's going to change. So that means that Josh Hart is likely going to be dealing with this syndrome for the entire season headed into the postseason. Now, I don't know if that's going to make him have to have a procedure in the offseason to correct whatever is going on with his right knee, but it is concerning, even though he can play through it. And it's likely not going to keep him out a lot of games this season and maybe even going into the postseason. He is still dealing with something in that knee. It's still uncomfortable. And if you're asking him to play, you're basically asking him to suck up the pain and play through that. And Josh Hart, of course he's going to do that. He's always going to do that if Tom Thibodeau asks him to do it. But is that good for his career long term? In my opinion, playing through pain, significant knee pain, is never going to be good for your career long term. You have to address it right away and make sure it doesn't bother you for the rest of your career, even though he can play through it. We should all ask ourselves this question. Should he? Should we risk Josh Hart and his health by having him play through this injury, even though he can? That's something to keep in mind. But after receiving this update, one of the questions that come to mind is, we're likely going to be down a few bodies tonight against the Bulls. Who is going to start in Josh Hart's place? Well, in my opinion, if OG Anunoby can't go and Josh Hart can't go, then you're going to see Deuce McBride and Preston Achiuwa both be starting. That's likely going to be your starting lineup. And off the bench, you're going to see Cam Payne, Landry Shamet, and Ariel Hukporti. You might see some Tyler Kolek minutes, but I actually doubt that as well, too. If we're missing so many bodies, you're going to see the Knicks go to an 8-man rotation. Now, in my opinion, you should expand the rotation if you're missing this many bodies. But Tom Thibodeau doesn't do that. Oftentimes, he makes the rotation even more limited. And I see him doing just that tonight against the Bulls. And if the Knicks are doing what I think they're doing, basically holding out Josh Hart and OG Anunoby from tonight's game, so that way they'll be fully active, fully available, and fully healthy, ready to go against Cleveland tomorrow. If that's what they're doing, I am fully okay with it. I support it, and I am on board with it because I believe we have enough to beat the Bulls, but we're going to need all hands on deck to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Knicks have what it takes. We are the team that we need to be. We just need to start playing like that team that is a championship contender. And I feel like once we're fully healthy, you'll start to see that championship contender emerge. And once we're there, we are not going to be able to be stopped because this Knicks team has what it takes, has the talent on this roster to go all the way to the NBA Finals. But what about you guys? What do you think about the Knicks providing all of these injury reports about Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson? And for OG and Mitch, what do you guys think about them both finally being cleared for 5-on-5 practice and with Mitchell Robinson practicing for the first time this season yesterday? Let me know how you feel about that in the comment section below, guys, because honestly, I would love to hear from you. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and smash that like button, leave a comment below. And of course, guys, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans, take care of yourself, your families, and each other. Peace and love.